once upon a time, in a land where ancient traditions still whispered through the wind and destinies were believed to be written before birth, there lived a young man named Obina, a man burdened not by poverty or failure, but by a terrifying truth that haunted every step he took. No member of his bloodline had ever lived beyond the age of 30. And as each year passed, death crept closer, like a silent hunter waiting patiently for its prey. For Obina was born into a family long rumored to be cursed, a curse so absolute that wealth, influence, and power could not shield its victims. As his parents had once been respected and affluent figures whose riches stretched across cities and villages. Yet, despite their abundance, every one of Obina's 5 siblings had died in strange, inexplicable ways shortly before reaching their 30th birthday, leaving him as the final heir to a lineage marked for extinction. And while others celebrated birthdays with music and laughter, Obina dreaded his own feeling no joy as he crossed, knowing time was no longer his ally. For his parents had exhausted every possible solution, consulting prophets, spiritualists, herbalists, and seers across nations, but none could sever the unseen chain binding their family to death. And although they eventually surrendered to fate, Obina could not, for he lived each day in constant fear, masking his terror behind luxury and routine, until one afternoon, while driving to the gym on his 28th birthday, he encountered a massive crowd gathered beside a bustling mall, their voices filled with rage and cruelty. And though he initially attempted to ignore them, something deep within him compelled him to stop, as if destiny itself tugged at his conscience, forcing him to park his car and push through the hostile crowd, where he was met with a horrifying sight: a frail, elderly woman, half naked and trembling on the ground as the mob prepared to burn her alive, accusing her of theft. And when Obina saw men rolling a tire forward and others pouring fuel with merciless intent, his heart refused to remain silent, and without hesitation, he stepped between the woman and her executioners, shielding her with his own body despite the danger, demanding to know her crime, only to hear a young woman claim the old lady had stolen an expensive phone and a large sum of money, a claim that sounded absurd against the woman's helpless state. And when the mob refused mercy, Obina chose sacrifice over silence, transferring ₦1,000,000 to the accuser without argument, dispersing the crowd, clothing the battered woman, and rushing her to the hospital, unaware that this single act of compassion was about to unravel a secret buried for generations and place him at the crossroads between death and redemption. When Obina returned to the hospital after his workout, he found the old woman stabilized, her fragile body resting peacefully despite the horrors she had endured. And as she opened her eyes and thanked him with a voice that carried centuries of sorrow, Obina felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle in his chest, prompting him to give her money and prepare to leave, believing his role in her survival had ended, until the woman suddenly grasped his hand with surprising strength and spoke words that froze his blood, telling him calmly that he had only 2 years left to live, a revelation that shattered his composure. For no stranger could have known the secret curse that plagued his family, and when he demanded answers, the woman revealed herself as a being far older and deeper than she appeared, claiming to be a daughter of the sea bound to ancient forces. And because Obina had shown her kindness when others chose cruelty, she would return the favor by unveiling the truth behind his family's doom, explaining that curses, like trees, could not be destroyed by trimming their branches, but only by uprooting them entirely. And as Obina listened in stunned silence, she began a tale rooted in his ancestral homeland long before modern roads and towering buildings existed. When two destitute friends named Goma and Mazi lived as beggars, scorned by their village, mocked for their poverty, until desperation led Goma to propose a visit to the feared Ikuku shrine, a place whispered to grant immense wealth at unimaginable cost. And although Mazi initially resisted, tragedy struck when his mother fell gravely ill and died within a day due to lack of funds, pushing him into hopelessness. And together they approached the shrine's custodian, who promised them riches beyond imagination, but demanded a price soaked in blood, the sacrifice of innocent virgins whose lives would anchor their wealth. And though terror filled their hearts, the threat of death forced their compliance, leading Goma to ambush a young maiden at a stream, brutally ending her life and burying her behind his home, while Mazi, tormented by guilt yet driven by fear, committed an even more deceitful act by luring a young girl who trusted him, drugging her, killing her, and burying her in secret. But unlike Goma, Mazi's conscience devoured him, and within 6 months, the spirit of the girl's grieving mother unleashed a curse that ended his life in agony, while Goma's victim haunted his dreams until the shrine demanded a darker covenant, sacrificing the first male child of every generation before his first birthday to sustain wealth and escape vengeance, a ritual Goma obeyed, unknowingly condemning his descendants, including Obina, 2 generations of bloodshed, fear, and early death. And as the old woman finished her story, Obina realized the curse was no myth but a debt unpaid, and unless it was settled, he would follow his siblings into the grave. As the old woman's revelation settled into Obina's soul like a heavy stone, fear transformed into desperation, and he collapsed to his knees, begging her to save him from the fate that awaited him. But she warned him that redemption demanded courage, humility, and sacrifice, not wealth or power, explaining that he must return to his ancestral village to locate the forgotten grave of the innocent girl his great-grandfather had murdered, exhume her remains, confess his family's sins publicly, and provide her with a burial befitting a queen, while seeking forgiveness from her surviving lineage, a task that would expose old wounds and challenge long-held pride. Yet Obina had no choice, for time was slipping through his fingers. And upon confronting his father, the truth was confirmed: the rituals were real, and his father had chosen love over blood sacrifice, unknowingly triggering the curse of vengeance that claimed his children. And together with his aging parents, Obina journeyed back to their homeland, enduring weeks of searching through oral histories and forgotten paths, until they found an elderly woman who remembered the murdered girl as an orphan from a neighboring village, leading them to her unmarked grave, where Obina unearthed her bones with trembling hands, carrying not just remains, but the weight of ancestral sins. And when they finally reached her family's compound, they confessed everything, kneeling in shame, expecting rejection or death. Yet instead they were met with sorrowful understanding, for the girl's spirit had haunted her people for generations as well. Demanding justice and moved by Obina's sincerity, the family agreed to help lift the curse, providing a list of ritual items and insisting on a grand ceremony to honor the girl's life rather than her death, transforming pain into remembrance. And as preparations were made, Obina felt something shift within him, a fragile hope that perhaps destiny could be rewritten, not erased, but redeemed. The day of the ceremony arrived like a sacred festival, drums echoing through the village as offerings were laid out. Elders chanted prayers, and a feast was prepared not in mourning but in honor, as the murdered girl was celebrated as royalty denied her crown in life. And as Obina stood among the gathered families, humbled and exposed, he felt the invisible chains around his soul begin to loosen until inside the family house, his eyes landed on an old framed photograph hanging on the wall, and his breath caught in his throat as he recognized the face instantly. It was the same elderly woman he had rescued weeks earlier, the same woman who told him the truth. And when he demanded answers, the family revealed that the woman was the girl's mother, long dead before her daughter disappeared, a revelation that sent chills through his body. For he realized the spirit had returned not for vengeance, but for justice and mercy, to test his heart before saving his life. And as the final rituals concluded and forgiveness was granted, a sudden calm swept through the land, as though the earth itself exhaled, signaling the curse had been lifted at last. With the curse broken, Obina returned home to discover that his family's supernatural wealth faded away, leaving them with nothing but honesty and hard work. Yet, for the first time, fear no longer dictated his days. And through resilience and determination, he built his own success, married a virtuous woman at 32, raised children, and lived beyond 80 years, watching generations flourish where once there was only death, proving that while evil may plant seeds across bloodlines, goodness has the power to uproot them. And the moral of Obina's story echoed through time, that kindness to strangers may save your life, that shortcuts to wealth carry generational consequences, and that redemption begins the moment courage meets compassion.